This is your HR virtual advisor and counsel coming to you today with your HR pro tip. Today's HR pro tip is going to be on the Americans with Disabilities Act, also known as the ADA. So I want you to buckle up for a moment because this can get a little bit complicated, a little bit confusing, but this is also a major area where organizations tend to have high risk. So here's how you can reduce your risk. First, it's by understanding what is the definition under the ADA, what is my duty and obligation as an employer, so that I can ensure that my employees' rights are not interfered upon or infringed upon. So, the ADA is going to prohibit any discrimination against employees who have a physical disability or a mental illness or impairment. Now, the law defines this as giving coverage to employees that have, again, a mental illness or impairment and physical disability where this is substantially impacting their major day-to-day life activities. Now, I've paraphrased that a bit, but that's the core of the definition. So, what does that mean for you as employers? Where does your pro tip come in? Well, there's a couple of things, a couple of key terms. The first is that you want to ensure that if you are placed on notice, meaning that an employee has let you know casually or intentionally that they have a disability or a mental illness, that is going to be a cue, clue, and trigger to pause and make sure that you, one, engage your HR so that they can support you in engaging in that interactive process with that employee. Now, what is the interactive process? The interactive process is an opportunity of good faith effort as an employer to acknowledge that they have been placed on notice and have heard the employee indicate that they have a disability or mental illness. Now, here's the caveat. Here's where this gets tricky, organizations, employers, and people managers. You heard me say casually or intentionally. Oftentimes, as an employer or a people manager, you become aware of a possible mental illness or disability, and it cannot be ignored. Under the law, it does say that an employer, under good faith effort, and a people manager is on notice even if the employee has not told you directly that they have a disability or a mental illness. Wow. You must be saying, this is confusing. Well, it is. So here's what's most important for you today in this pro tip. Whether you casually hear or find out that an employee has a mental illness or a disability, you need to pause. You need to engage in the interactive process. You need to put aside your attendance policy. You need to put aside your handbook for a moment and focus on the piece that talks about you ensuring under the law that you are not prohibiting or discriminating, rather, on your employees' rights to a possible, another key term, reasonable accommodation. So, why is this important? What is your takeaway from today? If you have someone, let's say, that calls in regularly lately about a migraine headache, whether they've been diagnosed or not, you heard my definition earlier that it is going to be anything that could potentially have substantially impaired a major life day-to-day activity. So if someone's saying to you, I have these major headaches, I've been going to the doctor, I am struggling to get up, and now they've been out 3-4 days, unexcused absence. Whoa, 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 pause. You might want to think twice about writing them up on disciplinary action. You could be perceived as discriminating against them and violating the rules and regulations under the ADA. So, your takeaway today is whether someone comes to you intentionally about a mental illness, impairment, or disability, I want you to think about the cues, clues, and triggers: migraine headaches, diagnosis, depression, anxiety, mental illness. Doesn't mean that you stop and you cannot hold anybody accountable, but you have a duty and an obligation once you are placed on notice to engage in the interactive process and ensure that you are potentially providing a reasonable accommodation. Now, that's your pro tip for today. When you hear someone talk about a disability or a mental illness, don't push it to the side. If you casually hear or identify that someone may have a mental illness, impairment, or disability, you need to engage in the interactive process. So I want you to pause for a moment, reflect. I want you to take a moment and reach out to your HR partner or HR department and make sure that they are supporting you with an interactive process to ensure that you are meeting your duty and an obligation as an employer and fulfilling good faith effort in supporting your employee in their rights to not be discriminated against or have their terms and conditions of employment impacted due to having a disability. Now, when we come back again and talk about reasonable accommodation and where you go from starting the interactive process, that will be part two. So remember, this is your HR virtual advisor. This is the HR verdict on the matter related to the ADA, and I hope you take heed to this and that you're ensuring that you're engaging in the interactive process.